welcome in to Red Corner, Blue Corner right here on Stadium, and a Happy New Year to everybody who is watching right now. Just wanted to let you know that the Blue Corner is empty right now. Jake Butt out there in Los Angeles making his way back, but he is certainly celebrating the Wolverines' berth into the national championship game. I am here trying not to hate, and I'm a professional, so I won't hate entirely too hard, but I know we do have Jake Butt on the line there, so we'll bring him in right now. Jake, how we feeling, man? Just wanted to give you the congratulations. They certainly are due. I'm salty it's not my team, but y'all definitely earned a win.
Hey, you know how I'm feeling, man. You know how I'm feeling. This is amazing. And honestly, like everyone said, the Rose Bowl would be the greatest college football experience that I'll ever go to, and I think that even was an understatement. It certainly delivered, and the win was the icing on the cake, man.
Was that your first Rose Bowl?
First Rose Bowl.
Okay, so I've covered 3 of them, and covering it every time is like covering it for the first time. I think it is the greatest setting in college football. I absolutely love it out there, and it has been known to give us really, really good games, and that's what we got. Now, I just wanted to ask you, are you sweating right now?
Yes, because I had to go through LAX, and there was a line around the corner of more Michigan fans than I'd ever seen in my life. I think the entire stadium was getting on a flight this morning, and I thought I wasn't going to be able to join you. So, yes, I got a light sweat going right now.
Okay, it's a light sweat as compared to last night, and I do believe we have a photo of you. This was a heavy sweat, and this is from our guy Dave Revson over there at Big Ten Network. He said he wanted to be clear, no one dumped water on you, Jake. So explain to the people why you're sweating so damn hard.
All right, well, we were up in the very top booth. Like, there's a media booth, which is like the top story of the Rose Bowl. And we had a show post-game. So, like, we left right before Michigan was about to take the field to go on their final drive to tie the game in regulation. We left. And as we're walking down as a crew, and I can hear, like, the anticipation building in the crowd, and I looked at our producer, and I'm like, hey, like, do you mind if I like run right now? Like, why are we walking? We're going to miss this. And he's like, no, go for it. So I like dead on sprinted in my full suit and my 15-pound backpack carrying all my cameras and everything like that. And of course, you know me, dude, it doesn't take much. But if I'm full sprinting about 800 meters in a suit, that's going to lead to a sweaty conclusion. And of course, it was a sweaty conclusion anyways with the suspense of the game. But it's the Rose Bowl, man. I'm not going to apologize for being fired up for a great game, especially when it's my alma mater handling business like they did.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't apologize for a great game. You should not apologize for Michigan winning. I think you should apologize for all that sweating. Sam Brief wants to know, are there any sweat stains on the blue couch? And we're investigating right now, and it seems like it's pretty dry for the moment, but I know when you get back, it might get a little bit sweaty there. But we do have to talk about this football game, though. As we talked about, Michigan comes away with the win. It was 27-20 as the final score, won in overtime. You alluded to what the environment was, and we all know what the Rose Bowl setting is, but give us a real window. You were down there on the field for that final play in overtime where Michigan got the defensive stop. Explain what everything was like in that moment and then the celebration thereafter.
It almost even started pre-game, JP. Like, I was on the field pre-game, and I say, like, there was a time when, you know, Big Ten teams or Michigan, whoever from the North was taking on the SEC's best, Alabama, Georgia. And when you look at it pre-game, you'd say, wait a second, like, the guys from the SEC, that's a different beast, man. Bigger, stronger, faster. When Michigan took the field, I was blown away. I think Michigan actually looked bigger, stronger, faster. And the level of focus and intensity from the Wolverines and Bama too. I mean, both teams, the way they took the field, we knew we were going to be in for a treat. But yeah, the conclusion of that final drive, it just pretty much sums up perfectly this entire season for Michigan. Certainly wasn't a perfect game, man, by no standards. I know, you know, they're going to go back and watch the tape and say, wow, you know, we won this game, but boy, did we leave some meat on the bone. But they did what they've done all season, which is come through in the biggest moments when they needed it most. And that fourth down drive, man, it was truly glorious. Probably the best feeling I can remember as a Michigan alum and a Michigan fan.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned how Michigan pulled through after some ugly moments in that football game, and we know the way it started with JJ throwing the interception that got overturned. There were a couple of special teams gaffes where one actually resulted in a turnover. The other one puts Michigan in a precarious spot toward the end of the football game. It seemed like none of that mattered to them. It seemed like a team that was really focused and ultimately destined on winning this football game. And you mentioned the magnitude of a team from the North beating an SEC team. It's not something that we see every day, particularly in the postseason. It's not something that happens. And quite frankly, this is a program we talk about under Jim Harbaugh that had struggled in the postseason. They had not won or even led in a playoff game up to this one, but ultimately they do get the dramatic victory. I'm coming up on 30 years this year. You're close in age to me. In your lifetime, has there been a bigger victory for Michigan? I understand they haven't won the national title yet, but I do think that this win is emblematic of what this program has been building towards. Is this the biggest win, you would say, in probably the last couple of decades?
I mean, the only thing that I think could even compete with it is just what the 2021 victory over Ohio State meant in the Big House for the first time in like 2 decades. I mean, that one, you want to talk about emblematic, that one's up there, but it's a different standard, man. When you're playing in a college football playoff, when you're playing for a national title, I mean, that's almost in a league of its own. You certainly can't compete with it. And man, I mean, you're playing the best the SEC has to offer for so many reasons. This game was the perfect challenge. You know, when has Michigan beat the best the SEC has to offer? It's been a while. Michigan hasn't won a college football playoff under Coach Harbaugh, has struggled in the postseason going back. The last bowl game before this was my junior year. Back in 2015, the last bowl victory. So this one is in a league of its own. Next week will probably eclipse that if Michigan can handle business. It definitely will eclipse it.
No, I mean, if Michigan handles business next week, that's certainly going to be one of the biggest victories probably in the history of that program. And we'll talk about some of the legendary players that can be made if they walk away with the victory there. I know the legacies are already being cemented after this Rose Bowl victory, but I want to move over to the offense. And when we were getting ready for this game, we had talked a lot about the Michigan offense and things that needed to occur. And some of the conversation was about things they did not do late in the year when J.J. McCarthy was banged up and the offense kind of took a little bit of a step back. But you and I also both realized some things that they always did that we thought were going to be a big shift in this game, something that could be a huge impact. I think from the beginning of the football game, Michigan used formations, personnel, shifts, motions to confuse the Alabama defense. And we talked about how much a Nick Saban defense needs to communicate in order to be successful. And they could not come up with answers defensively for what Michigan had to offer. So just starting off with the overarching offensive game plan from that standpoint, could it have been any better for Michigan with what they came out with?
I said, dude, I think that was Sharon Moore's best game. I mean, seriously, that was his best game. I think about that drive. You know, you want to talk about the start of the game, the rocky start. I mean, I thought that was an interception on the first play of the game. I couldn't believe my eyes. And then it wasn't. So then they punt the ball. The defense stands strong, and Samaj Morgan muffs a punt. Bama scores, and it's up 7-0. And it's like, man, we knew Michigan had to start fast, and here they are down 7-0. You don't want to gift a team like Alabama 7 points, and they needed to respond. And Sharon Moore called one of the cleanest drives I've seen to march Michigan right down the field and end in a touchdown to tie the game early. And then he continued that throughout the broadcast. Talent is like the minimum thing. Like you have to have a certain amount of talent, but my goodness, coaching matters. And it's like, can you take 11 guys and get them to unify as one unit? Can you play the mental game where you take a tough Alabama defense? They're littered with talent. And can you get them thinking and processing and questioning their eyes because of all your pre-snap window dressing shifts and motions? That's how you get an advantage on your side. And then the players were so ready as soon as Alabama was thinking up front, the offensive line, the receivers, as if they hesitated even for a second, Michigan was ready. They did not waste a moment. And it's just a credit, man, for all. We knew Michigan had to play their best game. Special teams certainly fell short of that standard. But offensively, man, this was definitely one of their best games they played considering the challenge all season.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. And you and I always have this conversation, too, and I think it's a great time to make this point. I'm a big believer that third downs are overrated in terms of stats for the game of football. Neither one of these teams were particularly great on third downs in this game. But you know where Michigan was great? It was on the fourth downs on offense, dialing up the fourth down plays to extend the drives. And that goes back to why I think third downs can be a little bit overrated. When they needed to get the plays, when they needed to extend drives, in the fourth down at the end of the game, you're on your own 30-yard line. You put the ball in the air to a guy who didn't catch it a ton out of the backfield this year in Blake Corum, and he takes it for an explosive. Those are the moments, and that's what they did. They did it against Ohio State. We saw that, but this is a team that capitalizes on those moments.
JP, you are spot on, man. And it leads to an even further point about the progression of Sherrone Moore. Started as a tight end coach, became like the co-OC 3 years ago, the leading OC last year, the full-time OC this year. So he told us in the post game that, like, ahead of it, Jim Harbaugh said, hey, we got 2 downs here. You're going to go for it. They went for fourth down on a number of occasions. And he said each time he knew Jim was going to let him go for it on fourth down. And he said each time he had a play ready. And that's what you notice. That fourth down to extend the drive on the final play, one thing I realized, that did not feel like a fourth down. Like, it didn't feel like a gravitational moment. They just got in the huddle, broke the huddle, lined up, ran a play, easy completion, moved the chains. And it's like that to me is the sign and a perfect example of the changing perception of Michigan's program. Like, that is a clear indication of progress for the Wolverines.
All right, let's talk about this offensive line for Michigan, because it was one of the question marks we had coming in. Obviously, the injuries, they'd given up some pressures late in the year. You know, we knew it was a good group, maybe not as good as the last 2 offensive lines that they had. Quite frankly, I think that they dominated the line of scrimmage on either side, but offensively, again, I think it goes back to the way that they created plays and they were able to mask maybe some of the pimples that they had up front. But they also knew what the assignment was and who they had to eliminate, and that was Dallas Turner, who was one of the best players in the country. And he had a couple plays, but largely was a non-factor in that football game in terms of being disruptive and creating TFLs and creating sacks. What do you say about the performance of the Michigan offensive line in this game?
2 things. First off, Trente Jones is a guy that has stepped up big time. Gets, you know, when Zach Zinner goes down, they move Barnhart as a tackle inside to guard, and Trente Jones, who's a guy that completely selfless all year, man. He was the extra tight end. He'd play. He was this first guy off the bench, the 6'0 lineman. He comes in and maybe he might have had the best game of anybody yesterday. Phenomenal job out there at tackle. But then I also go back to the play calling. I just want our viewers to put yourself in the shoes of a Dallas Turner, an elite pass rusher, and then put yourself in the shoes of Michigan's offense and all the pre-snap motion. And as an elite pass rusher, I like space. I don't want to be chipped and touched. So a couple times he's lining up on the edge and there's no one outside of him, and he's thinking, man, I got a clean rush here. This is great. And then the shift happens and they get into a bunch formation. And mentally he's thinking, oh, I'm going to get chipped. So he's prepared there. And then sometimes they chip them, sometimes they pull away. They're completely getting an elite player thinking in his own head and on his heels. So it's the performance of the O-line, but it's also the scheme and execution by Sherrone Moore.
Yeah, I think Michigan, ultimately, they own the thought process. They own the tempo. They own the variety of the game. And that's exactly what we got. Based off of the way that they came out from a game plan, but in terms of trying to eliminate the best pass rusher on the field, they did that as well. But, Jake, we're going to take our first break right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner, but we got so much more action coming your way, and you know we got to talk about the other side of the ball, and that is that Michigan defense. And there's one unit in particular I don't think is getting enough credit coming out of this game. We'll discuss it coming up. All right, we're back right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. Jake Butt joining me from LAX. My man is getting ready to fly back here to the great city of Chicago. I'm Joshua Perry. We got to talk about the Michigan defense here. And I know the initial storyline is what the Michigan defensive line did, especially early in that game, had 5 sacks in the first half. Jalen Milroe could not get through a read progression. He could not escape the pocket. That was all phenomenal. I want to talk about that here in a sec, because I think people are not giving enough credit to the secondary for the University of Michigan. They gave up 116 yards passing, and part of the reason why Jalen Milroe had to sit back there and hold the football was because there was nobody open. And Jalen Milroe was one of the best deep ball throwers in all of college football and didn't hit a damn deep ball all day long. I mean, the front was phenomenal, but we got to give that secondary their flowers right now because they came to play.
Flat out, man. And listen, this is what they'll tell you. It's the no-star defense. So the secondary will say, man, shout out to the D-line. The D-line will say, shout out to the secondary. They'll bring the linebackers involved. But I think the mastermind behind all this, JP, is Jesse Minter, because the defensive coordinator, he's the one that gets this all to work together, because sometimes it's the D-line that steps up. Sometimes the secondary holds coverage long enough for the D-line and the linebackers to get home. But, I mean, I know you appreciate great defense. They had an absolute phenomenal plan for a dangerous quarterback in Jalen Milroe and a dangerous Alabama offense, and they executed, I mean, A+. There was 1 or 2 plays that might have scared you as a Michigan fan, but for the most part, throughout the entire game, Michigan had Bama's number.
I agree with that. I think when Alabama started going to more of the quarterback run, I think that's where the defense maybe had to take its edge off a little bit, and I'm not exactly sure why they didn't go to some of that earlier. But even at that point, Michigan started making the adjustments, and they started hitting Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe puts the football on the ground, ends up being a potential momentum swing. Of course, Michigan didn't score off of that, but the opportunity to get the football back in a game like that I think is really important. Like, the defense did all of the things that it needed to do. Now, to go back to that defensive line, the sack numbers were ridiculous. It's something that we have rarely seen against the Nick Saban team. It's something that we had not seen in the college football playoff up to that point. And when you talk about Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for Michigan, the thing that I love, and you get on the internet and you'll see people talking about how come Tommy Rees couldn't adjust and how come, they didn't have an answer for these blitz packages. The way that they were sending guys, there's not really an answer. You're showing dudes up at the line of scrimmage. You don't know who's dropping in. You don't know who's dropping out. You're trying to turn the protection because you see an overload, and all of a sudden they're bringing the overload from the other side, guys coming from depth. All of those different things. It was a masterfully created game plan that put a whole offense in a blender for half of a game.
One of the biggest differences in this game, and it's subtle, and it probably won't get discussed, but it was the coordinators on both sides of the ball, what they did pre-snap. It was the pre-snap mind games that they played with Alabama that gave them the advantage. You mentioned the blitzes on defense. I had no idea where the pressure was coming from. From a pre-snap shell, it could have came from everywhere, and it did come from everywhere.
Yeah, we talked about the pre and the post snap looks, and you're one who always points that out. And especially when you're going against a guy like Milroe, where you have to affect his eyes in order to affect his legs. Yeah. Michigan did that with a ton of success, and they deserve a ton of credit for that plan. But we're going to take our final break right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. And on the other side, we got to talk about the coaches in this one. Did Jim Harbaugh get the best of Nick Saban? And we also got to talk about a Michigan player who had T-Bob on his mind this morning. We're going to tackle all of that and more coming up. We got a little conference clash over here on Red Corner, Blue Corner, and we got to bring in a tweet from Derek Moores, a player for the University of Michigan. He's going at T-Bob right now. Let all the naysayers know, he says, because T-Bob posted a tweet. It says, why Alabama's going to bully Michigan in the college football playoff. So let's bring in all of the guys. Of course, Jake Butt rejoining us from LAX. We got AJ McCarron, whose Crimson Tide was on the losing side of that Rose Bowl, and T-Bob Hebert, who is going viral today. T-Bob, what do you have to say?
I don't know what kind of cruel, ironic hand life has given me, but the fact that now the entirety of the Michigan fan base thinks that I'm an Alabama fan is driving me insane. I pay a young kid. I love him to death. He's my boy, Danny, okay? Used to produce for me. I pay him to tweet stuff out, do videos, stuff like that, right? So he tweets out a video of a guest we had on, Brooks Austin, who's a Georgia guy and who was like being very pro-Bam, whatever. So this goes out there. It was okay. It had like 100,000 views. It's not got 900,000, and it is just all Michigan fans being like, what the F's a T-Bob? Who's this fat loser? And so now all of a sudden, if you're a Michigan fan, you probably think that I love Alabama. I hate Alabama. I was so happy when they lost. It filled my heart with joy. I am so happy that there's not an SEC team in this championship. We're on the cusp of a golden age. College football looks like it may be more democratized than ever. This has been an excellent 4-team playoff.
I agree with you.
Well, T-Bob, as the representative of the Blue Corner and the Michigan guy, I can confirm to our viewers, you've been on the Michigan train, you've been supportive, and you've been anti-Alabama through and through. So that is true as it gets. But, AJ, you were on the Bama train. Of course, you know, you played for Nick Saban. And I'm curious just from a coaching standpoint, because throughout the game, you know, that coming out of halftime, it looked like Saban made some good adjustments. It looked like Alabama was seizing some momentum. But in your opinion, over the course of the game, full 60 minutes, do you think Saban was out-coached by Jim Harbaugh?
No, I mean, I don't think he got out-coached. Listen, Harbaugh had some horrific offensive calls, like, and the times he called them, right? The flea flicker, the quarterback throwback that could have been an absolute disaster. That's a bad call. Like, you had momentum as a whole because you got away with some special team mistakes, right, that really could have cost you the game multiple times, especially early. And, like, you had the momentum on your side. The defense was playing well. The offense was moving the ball well enough. I mean, you were establishing the run with Blake Corum. Like, I don't think he got out-coached by any means. Listen, Alabama just didn't make enough plays. Like, it is what it is. The thing that crushes Alabama is, and listen, I like Jalen Milroe a lot. He's just not a guy that's going to beat you and scare you as a defensive mindset from throwing the ball every down, right? Like they all year long, if they've been able to establish the run and they've been able to play action and throw the ball deep, and not intermediate, not short. It's been nothing but deep passes. They've had success as an offense. Well, Michigan's game plan was, hey, we're going to blitz, play tricks with his eyes, right? We're going to try to stop the run, not allow the run to get started early. So, and when it comes to play action, stay deep. Make them sustain drives. Don't give up the explosive play. Yeah. Don't give up something that just, you know, lets them score right off the bat, and make them sustain drives. And Bama struggled with that.
I'm going to push back on the flea flicker being a bad call. I think the result was bad, but I don't think it was a bad call because if Blake Corum actually gets the football back there, that's an explosive for Michigan. I will never say, and I'll let y'all have this time since your show is coming up, but I won't say that Nick Saban necessarily got out-coached, and I think that if we're ranking the coaches, we say Nick Saban's better than Jim Harbaugh. But Nick Saban's coordinators got out-coached by Jim Harbaugh's coordinators, and I don't think it was fairly close. I think that the Michigan coordinators were able to manipulate the game more than what the Alabama coordinators could do, and it felt like Alabama was trying to do more adjusting because Michigan was taking it to them in terms of how they wanted to play that game from a schematic standpoint.
Well, and I would argue, Josh, that I don't even know if Jesse Minter coached Tommy Rees. I don't know if Tommy Rees felt handcuffed with play calling from a passing game standpoint. Like, listen, it's a time to be honest, right? Like, I don't know if Tommy Rees felt comfortable enough to open up the passing game and get in the gun. Listen, there was multiple times where they confused Jalen, right? People want to talk about the O-line, but it's also the quarterback's job, right, to help the O-line. They were in a scat protection. They did what we call star motion. The halfback went behind the quarterback out, free release. It's a 5-man pro, right? It looks like they could bring somebody from the right. They end up just single dog from the left, and he gets sacked. Well, you have to know that's your squeeze side or that's your hot side. Now we have to play hot to the single receiver side, or we have to throw it to the halfback. It's just like the last play. Everybody wants to talk about the last play being a bad play call.
RPO.
Listen, I don't know. I don't know if it was a designed QB draw, but there's an RPO effect to that, right? You have to know in that situation, inside the 5-yard line, it's going to be cover 0. You have to have that mindset as a quarterback automatically going in. It was cover 0, okay? You still motion the halfback out. Listen, if the guy's trailing him from behind, throw it to him.
I agree.
I don't care. Yeah. Oh, but also the snap, played a part in that. But if Jalen just follows the pulling guard,
if he follows the puller, he's probably in too.
It's a touchdown because the nickel or safety, whoever
he's
came
running
off
up
the edge
field
right there, he was up the field.
Yeah.
So I understand the snap wasn't great, but there's also different aspects to that play. And now it couldn't listen. I don't know. I wasn't in the play call in the huddle, but it could have been a straight up QB draw just with that action to it. But listen, I think that play right there summed up the whole offensive game plan for Alabama and Tommy Rees not trusting Jalen Milroe to throw it and win the game for him, right? Because any other quarterback, you're putting the ball in their hands to throw or pass. Hey, either we're going to roll out or we're going to have some type of our best 2-point play, best red zone concept, and now he has the option to throw it or run. And calling a straight-up QB draw right there, I think Tommy Rees, just doubted Jalen in that situation, which sucks.
So you arrive at, you think it was a straight-up QB draw? Because I would kind of, and maybe this is just me looking at it from the center's point of view, I feel like the low snap just made everything just crumble and fall apart. I think he just absolutely panicked. Like, and because of how Michigan had been attacking him all game long, his internal clock was sped up to the point where he's like, oh my God, like I don't got time, like I got to hit it. And he's Jalen Milroe. He's super fast. He's super strong. If you panic, what do? You fall back on instinct. And it was just, okay, I'm just going to run up in there and just power my way through.
100%. I'm with you. Yeah, no, I'm with you. The snaps were absolutely horrific, right? Like
all year long.
You're a damn
shocking.
Yeah, you're a starting center at the University of Alabama. And listen, I understand everybody has bad games, but this has been an issue all year. And if we can't find somebody else to snap the damn ball to the quarterback, get his butt out of there, right? We got to put somebody else in.
AJ, somebody said that you're making excuses up here. Would you like to reply to this viewer here?
Ottawa Traveler.
I don't understand what the excuses there are. Like, listen, they lost the game. I mean, it is what it is. They had a chance to win. Hell, I mean, Michigan gave them plenty of opportunities. And the punt at the end, like you had plenty of chances to win the ball game. But
Jake, hold on. I need a health check on Jake now. What was going through your head with the second fumbled punt at the end of the game? Like, did you have an iWatch on? Did your heart did notifications start going off? Like, are you okay? Are you alive?
His Apple Watch was soaked in sweat by that point. It was soaked in sweat by that point.
Everyone was wondering why I was sweating. Like, that's why I was sweating. We put in Jake Thaw, who hasn't returned a punt all game. First off, guys, this is day one. Put your heels at the 10-yard line.
I know,
Put your heels at the 7-yard
No,
line.
Jake.
Do not go backwards, and they did it like 3 times last night.
Jake, they changed the heels at the 10 because the punters are so good at getting the ball to check up that they do tell him heels at 5 nowadays, but he should not have gone back. So I will correct you on that one.
I don't care.
I don't like this. I don't like this new age
even
football
care,
crap.
though, dude.
Heels at the 10. That's how I grew up, and that's how it's always going to be.
You can do the heels at the 5 if you have a dog back there returning punts, but Michigan, like they can't even. The biggest concern is catching the damn punt.
No, you just
get out of there.
You heels at the 5, and then you catch it there. If it's over your head, you let it go. But they're so good at getting it to check.
I could smell the fear of that returner all the way in Louisiana.
I could too.
I mean, it was wafting throughout the country. Hey, all's well that ends well, though. And in the end, in my opinion, though, we'll break it down this hour, this half hour. I still think because they overcame all the mistakes that Michigan won that game as opposed to Alabama losing it. But we'll continue to break it down. Red corner, blue corner. Thank you so much, Joshua. Thank you so much, Jake.
Happy New Year.
Travel safe. Happy
Appreciate
New
it,
Year,
fellas.
boys. And now it's time for me and AJ McCarron to continue to break down as, you look at these offensive stats from Alabama and rushing for 172, throwing for 116, had the ball for 32 minutes, just one turnover, but overall an ineffective night for the Tide offense. And this was something that if you looked at the game log from this season, AJ, there was maybe a hint, and now this is partially benefit of hindsight, but there's maybe a hint that this could be on the horizon, because when you looked at when Alabama had great offensive success, it was like, okay, but who was the good defense that they did it against? Now, Georgia was great defense, right? And Alabama was good enough in that game, but even then the offense wasn't like overwhelmingly great. So now that you're on the other side of this, you saw a full season of this offense, a full season of Reese and Milroe. How do you evaluate their performance from last night? Like, it was subpar. So where does that fault eventually lie in your mind?
Listen, I mean, answering this could get me killed by Alabama fans, right? Like, Jalen has to take a step, right?
Yeah.
He has to take the next step as a passing quarterback. You all year long, you've done these interviews talking about you're, a passing quarterback, you're not a runner, and you've played that up. Now there comes a time as a player where you have to do a reality check on yourself, and you have to realize you're a running quarterback. There's nothing wrong with it, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But be you. Like, that game yesterday showed, and parts of Georgia, the game versus Georgia in the SEC championship game, like that, it showed as well. Like, you're a running quarterback first. And Bama lacked being able to throw the ball from a short to intermediate quick game. And now part of that's it's not all Jalen, right? Part of that's on Tommy. Like, Tommy Reese has to understand, listen, if they're confusing him up front, they're confusing the O-line, whoever they're confusing, obviously they're confusing somebody they're getting in. And it wasn't like they were sending the house. I mean, a lot of times they were rushing 5. And they were getting in.
Mainly. It was almost always 5 disciplined rush lanes. Guys, they were funneling Milroe into the looper and doing a really effective job of it pretty consistently.
Right. Or they would, take the nose from the opposite side and run a game to where he's wrapping all the way around, and then they would have the O-line slide that way and then bring the single dog backside.
Yes, exactly.
They were just playing games. So, and it's not like they were doing that rushing 5 and playing man. They were rushing 5 and playing zone. So if that's the case, like, there's holes there. So let's work up some quick game, right? Let's get the ball out, just get it in guys' hands. If it's a 4-yard game on first down using quick game, that's fantastic. Like, I don't understand if it's, Tommy just not having the confidence in Jalen to do, what he needs to from a passing game standpoint on every down situation, or if it's, Jalen just not being able to take that next step. Like, I don't know what it is, but you have to figure that out this offseason, right? You have
I think too,
take the next step.
It's probably kind of hard to get better in the areas you're talking about, AJ, when you continue to win, right? I mean, Isn't it Nick Saban himself who talks about the value of a loss and never letting failure go to waste and things along those lines? Like, yeah, they could still have recognized we need to grow in these areas, but if they're even beating the vaunted Georgia Bulldogs with being deficient in these areas, then like it's kind of like, okay, let's keep doing the thing that we did that got us here. And unfortunately, they ran into a defense that they just played really disciplined, really complete, and Milroe looked a bit over his head. I want to do a real quick one here before we break and flip it to the other side of the ball, because I've seen this kind of bandied about. Is it a lack of – do you think there's a lack of weapons for Alabama? And you think about the national championship Alabama teams, the incredible receivers in 20. I mean, whether it's like having a Julio Jones and Amari Cooper, Jermaine Burton and Isaiah Bond got better. But do you think is that an element in this pie?
Well, I mean, listen, Isaiah Bond had made huge plays all year. I think Isaiah has a chance to be, probably a third-round draft pick. Listen, yeah, did they have as many weapons as Tua had, as Mac had, as Jalen had? Like, no. But I promise you, like, it's not always that way. So that was just a rare run. There's plenty of teams in college football that have success in the passing game that don't have, 4 first-round draft picks there all at once. So, hell, I think at one time Bama had more than that. I think they maybe had up to 6.
It was insane.
So listen, you can't use that as an excuse, right? Like, I mean, you've been in one of the top teams in the country all year. You got to go out and play. They have plenty of weapons to be able to, have success in the passing game. There's just some type of disconnect there with Tommy, Jalen, the passing game standpoint. For whatever reason, it's just there's not confidence being shown through Tommy to Jalen or Jalen to Tommy. Like, the passing game was a huge letdown. And listen, when you live and die off of play action and chunk it deep, that's what you're going to run into when you can't play action and throw it deep.
Yeah, explosivity is feast and famine. And unfortunately, it was famine yesterday for the Tide. Now it's time for a first break here on Rivals Down South. Coming up, let's flip the script, and we'll get AJ's thoughts on the Alabama defense, what went wrong there, kind of a shocking game flow. More coming up next on Rivals. What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to Rivals Down South. T-Bob Hebert, A.J. McCarron, Alabama legend. If you heard me espousing Alabama hate earlier in the show, it's actually directly because of this man. So, like you can actually blame AJ if you're annoyed with me, because he's the one that took a national championship from me my senior year. But that also means, along with his NFL experience, that he's very well suited to giving you the actual tea on what happened yesterday. We just did it with the Alabama offense. Let's look at the Alabama defense, because that was the strength of this team all year long. That was the really unbeatable unit, that secondary, the pass rush with Dallas Turner. And it was certainly, it wasn't a bad game from the Alabama defense. In fact, for much of the game, it looked like it was quite good, even to good enough. What did you see anything? What happened after that 4th and 2? Because the entire second half, up into that 4th and 2, that Alabama defense was locked in, dominating. And then after they give up the big play on 4th and 2, they suddenly looked hapless for the remaining bit of the game.
Well, I mean, Michigan hit them on the same thing. It's a play, we've called it here. We've called it Harden. We've called it, I've called it Buccaneer in the past, but it's the halfback free releasing. He usually starts on the opposite side, and he free releases, say he starts on the left, he free releases to the right between the A or B, sometimes C, best release for him. But listen, Bama got beat on that, playing the same coverage both times. It was quarters. Listen to Herbie talk about
quarters.
Talking about and anybody that knows Coach Saban and his defense, his quarters concept turns into a match concept, right? It's quarters, but it ends up playing like man. And between backers, it's why they had trouble on even the crosses, right? Michigan kept like X shorting or Z shorting their receiver in, and then he was hitting crossing routes or shallows on the move. That comes from where it turns into man, but now the linebackers have to communicate and they have to pass it off to each other. Because if the guy comes in motion and then he ends up sitting down, the linebacker nearest to him takes him, right? If he goes across his face, he ends up passing it to the next linebacker. They got beat twice on that. One on the first touchdown to Corum, and then to Blake at the end on the 4th and 2. It's the same exact thing.
Everybody kind of clears him out, and then the miscommunication,
it's a
natural rub.
Form of mesh. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Hell, what's crazy, T-Bob, is the touchdown at the very end when they hit one and right before overtime. That was another concept. It was the same thing. They ran a mesh, 2 receivers, or the tight end and receiver from the left coming across the middle mesh. They fake the halfback on inside zone, and then they had one escape out the backside. It was the same type of play. They burned them on it like 3 or 4 times yesterday.
Well, and so again, to me, which I consider myself absolutely like a layman compared to you when watching film, like to me, I came away, I quickly rewatched the first half today, and I came away pretty impressed with Michigan's play design. A lot of pre-snap movement, a lot of mesh concepts, like you said, both in the route trees, but also behind the line, right, where all the action's going this way. Maybe it's like a little counter pitch back this way. It feels like Michigan did a very good job of attacking the flanks and horizontally to kind of open up that Alabama defense, where you're not going to beat them vertically because those DBs are too good. Were you impressed with what Moore and company did offensively from a game plan standpoint?
Oh, 100%. Listen, I mean, against Alabama, right, and anybody that has played for Coach Saban that knows his scheme, you can't just come out and line up and think that you're gonna, just smash mouth. Like you have to play tricks with their eyes, right? Because as a defense, everybody knows Coach Saban sends in a call. All right, this is the first original call might be a 3-by-1 call. And then all of a sudden there's a guy that comes in motion, and now they're in a 2-by-2. Well, now their defensive call that they originally had goes to something else, right? Or if they start in, a 3-by-0 formation, and then they come over and go to a 2-by-2, like that's a different play call. So they have multiple play calls within one deal. So based off of formation, based off of strength of their alignment, like based off of where the halfback is, they have multiple calls, and I thought Michigan did a lot of playing tricks with Bama's eyes from a shift standpoint, motion standpoint, and they never allowed them. And usually, a lot of times when they did that, they snapped the ball quick. It's not like they did it and then took forever to allow the defense to get their call. It was, hey, we're going to shift to here, or we're going to motion here, and then we're snapping and we're going fast, and it caused Bama some problems.
And so, I mean, they have to communicate, and then you try to force that communication and then immediately pop them on it. It's a great plan. All right, still to come. What's next for Nick Saban, Alabama? Keep it locked right here. Rivals Down South. What's happening, y'all? Welcome back to Rivals Down South. Interesting tweet after the game as Dallas Turner wasted no time letting you know what his offseason plans are going to be, as he says, quote, "I'm gone. Ain't no ifs, ands, or buts about it." It's just interesting, AJ, because, this is not unexpected. Turner, he's going to be a big-time NFL prospect, but, I don't know. There's just, a little extra subtext here. Being that aggressive with it, maybe it's, I know, when I was done with college, I feel that. I was like, I'm never running another 110 in my life. Give me that. I've had every minute of my day planned for 5 years now. I want a little autonomy here over my life. So maybe it's just that, but do you read anything extra into that?
Well, I mean, listen, he's probably frustrated after the game.
That's fair.
He's probably pissed off, and he could have been pissed about defensive calls and, things that happened during the game that didn't go his way. But, yeah, I mean, you wish he wouldn't have said anything just from that standpoint, because they'll ask him about it when it comes to the draft and combine and everything else. So, yeah.
There's a lot of conversation going on today as well about, where does Alabama go from here? Look, man, if this year didn't prove to you that as long as Nick Saban's around, Alabama's going to be as championship relevant as any team in the country, like Alabama's going nowhere. And I think this was a successful year, absolutely. And unfortunately, I think they're going to be awesome again next year.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, Coach Saban said it after the game. I think this is probably his best coaching year he's had in a long, long time to have this team in the college football playoff.
He is AJ McCarron. AJ, Happy New Year, bro. Keep grinding away. Season almost done. Hell yeah, it's been a ton of fun. We'll see you tomorrow for some more Rivals Down South.